Hey there everyone! Today I want to share a story that shaped who I am. It's a tale about family, sacrifice, and a twist of fate that taught me the true meaning of boundaries. Grab a snack, sit back, and let's dive into the journey that began when I was just a teenager. It was a typical day in my childhood home in a quiet suburb. My name is Alex, and I was the middle child, sandwiched between my older brother Jake and my younger sister Lily. Our house was a modest two-story structure with peeling paint and a creaky wooden porch. It had character, but it was also a bit worn down, just like our family dynamics. I remember the day it happened, like it was yesterday. I had just returned from school, excited to share my latest adventure with my family. But when I stepped inside, I could sense something was off. The usually warm atmosphere felt heavy, almost like a storm was brewing. "Mom? Dad?" I called out, dropping my backpack by the door. No response. I wandered through the living room and into the kitchen, where I found my parents huddled over the table. The atmosphere felt thick with unspoken worries. And then I heard it, the words that would change everything. "Alex, can you come here for a minute?" my dad said, looking unusually somber. I approached them, a knot forming in my stomach. "What's up?" My mom glanced at me, her eyes softening. "We've made a decision about the rooms in the house." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart racing. "Well," my dad started, "we think it's time for Lily to have your room. It's bigger, and she needs the space for her studies." I blinked, confusion swirling in my mind. "But that's my room. I've lived there for years." My parents exchanged glances. "We know, but we need you to be understanding. We're going to move you to the attic." "The attic?" I echoed, disbelief flooding my voice. "Why would you send me up there? It's dark and cramped." "Stop being difficult, Alex. This is what's best for the family." My mom snapped, frustration creeping into her tone. The anger bubbled within me. "It's not fair," I shouted, storming out of the room, feeling betrayed and alone. Living in the attic was an adjustment, to say the least. The space was small, filled with dusty boxes and the remnants of my parents' forgotten dreams. Old stuffed animals, boxes of clothes, and broken toys were crammed into every corner. The roof slanted in awkward angles, and the only window was a tiny square that barely let in any light. I remember the musty smell, the creaky floorboards, and how I had to dodge cobwebs every time I climbed the rickety ladder to my new room. The first night, I lay on the makeshift bed, a worn-out mattress on a bed frame held together with duct tape, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house settling and the muffled laughter from Lily's room below. My heart sank as I realized I was now the invisible sibling, hidden away in a space that felt more like a punishment than a home. I complained about how hot it was in summer, how cold it became in winter, and how I could hear every creak of the house at night. But my parents would just tell me to stop being so dramatic. They had it so easy in their spacious rooms, while I was stuck in what felt like a glorified storage space. The attic was far from comfortable. There were leaks in the roof, and every time it rained, I had to scramble to find buckets to catch the drips. I often found myself wishing for a little more space, a little more light, and a little more understanding from the people I called family. I also missed privacy. The attic was essentially a shared space, with all my old toys and school projects crammed into every corner. I had little room for my belongings, and I often felt like I was living in a museum of my own childhood. As the months passed, I developed a sense of bitterness. Family dinners felt awkward, with Lily often flaunting her new room and the privileges that came with it. I remember one night at dinner when she laughed about how she had a dedicated study area while I was relegated to a corner of the attic with a desk that barely fit. "Honestly, Alex, you should just be grateful you have a roof over your head," she said. It stung. I felt a wave of resentment wash over me. I wanted to scream that I had been the one who had lived in that attic, not her. I remember one particularly rainy night when I was trying to study for an important exam. The sound of raindrops hitting the roof was deafening and I couldn't concentrate. I knocked on the door to Lily's room hoping for some sympathy, but she just rolled her eyes saying, "You're such a drama queen, just deal with it." I found myself retreating back to my attic, feeling more alone than ever. I would lie in bed at night staring at the ceiling and thinking about how unfair it all was. I felt trapped in a space that reminded me of my childhood dreams now turned into a prison. Then came the day when Jake, my older brother, came home for a visit. He was in town for a weekend and I thought maybe he could help relieve some of the tension. We sat in the living room and I finally poured out my frustrations. It's not easy living in the attic. I feel like I'm invisible in this family. Jake listened, nodding, but then he said something that surprised me. Alex, it's not just about the attic. It's about how you're handling it. You're letting it control you. His words hit me hard. I had always admired Jake for his ability to stay calm and collected. But at that moment, I felt like I was drowning in my own bitterness. You're right, I admitted. But it's hard to be positive when I feel so pushed aside. Jake suggested we go for a walk. The fresh air felt good, and as we strolled through our old neighborhood, I reminisced about better days, playing in the backyard, exploring the woods, and having family barbecues. "Have you thought about talking to mom and dad about how you feel?" Jake asked. "I don't think they'd understand." "They never did," I replied, feeling a mix of hopelessness and frustration. As time went on, I felt more isolated. I would hear Lily and Jake planning outings, and I felt like I was missing out. I would sit in my attic, listening to their laughter echoing through the house, and I often found myself crying quietly, wishing for a family that felt like a team rather than a collection of individual. Fast forward several years, I graduated high school and then college. I worked hard, and with some luck, I was able to buy my first home, a small but charming place with a cozy attic. I often thought about my childhood, how it shaped me, and the lessons it taught me about resilience and independence. But life has a funny way of turning things upside down. One day, I received a call from my parents. They were in a tough spot, having lost their home due to some unfortunate financial decisions. They needed a place to stay. As I sat in my new living room, the weight of their request settled heavily on my shoulders. I had a decision to make. Part of me wanted to say no, to remind them of all those years I spent in that attic, but another part of me felt compassion. After all, they were still my parents. "Of course, you can move in," I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady. When they arrived, I greeted them with a smile. "Welcome to your new home," I said, trying to keep the mood light. The look of relief on their faces was palpable. They brought in boxes and bags, settling into the living room while I offered to help them unpack. After a few hours, I led them up to the attic. "This will be your room," I announced, watching their expressions shift from confusion to shock. "What do you mean, Alex?" my dad stuttered, glancing around. "We're not living in the attic." "Oh, but you are," I replied, my voice steady. "This is where I spent my teenage years. When you decided I wasn't worth a proper room, I thought it would be fitting for you to experience what I did." My mom's face dropped and my dad looked at me incredulously. "You can't be serious." "I am. This is what you wanted, right? You wanted to teach me a lesson about family and sacrifice. Well, here's your chance to learn too." Lily, who had been listening from the bottom of the stairs, rushed up, her eyes blazing. "You can't be serious, Alex. You can't make them live in the attic. They don't have anywhere else to go." I shot back, "You enjoyed your cozy room while I was up here. Remember?" The argument escalated, voices rising as old resentments bubbled to the surface. "You think you can just make this decision for everyone? There are parents," she yelled. "And you think it's okay that I was stuck up here all those years?" I replied, frustration pouring out. "You've had your turn. Now it's theirs." Jake, who had been silent until now, stepped in. "This isn't the solution, Alex. We need to help them, not punish them." But I was firm in my decision. They need to understand the consequences of their actions, just like I did. The weeks that followed were tense. My parents struggled with their new living situation, finding the conditions appalling. The attic was still the same, musty, cramped, and filled with shadows. I could hear them complain about the heat and the lack of space, echoing my own complaints from years ago. "Stop being difficult, Dad. This is what's best for the family." They were taken aback by my mockery, and it stung. I felt a mix of satisfaction and guilt wash over me. My mom often tried to make the best of it, attempting to organize the clutter and create a small nook for themselves, but it was clear they were struggling. I could hear them whispering late at night, discussing their regrets and how they wished they had done things differently. One evening, I was sitting on the porch, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. My parents joined me, and after a moment of silence, my dad finally spoke. "Alex, we've realized how unfair we were to you. You deserved better than what we gave you." My heart softened at his admission. It's not about what happened in the past anymore. It's about moving forward. We can learn from this. As the weeks continued, we began to have family meetings, discussing not only the logistics of living together but also our feelings. I found that my parents were more willing to listen than I had ever given them credit for. One night, during a family dinner, I decided to bring up the past. "Do you remember all those times I complained about the attic?" I asked, looking at my parents. "I didn't just want a room, I wanted to feel valued." My mom nodded slowly. That evening opened up a floodgate of emotions. We began to share our fears and aspirations, slowly repairing the cracks that had formed in our family over the years. I allowed my parents to stay in the guest room. Lily and Jake also apologized, and we all had a heartfelt talk. It became a healing process for all of us, and the attic, once a symbol of my resentment, transformed into a space of understanding. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope this story resonates with you. Remember, family is complicated, but there's always room for growth and understanding. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in my situation? Let's keep the conversation going.